Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the Girl Boss Method podcast, hosted by myself, Ritu Bra. So, tonight's topic, we are going to be talking all about progressive overload. So, progressive overload. What is progressive overload? So, for those of you that are joining me live, you're inside the program, you will have full access to the slides. You'll be able to see the slides. And for those of you that are listening to the podcast, you'll only be able to hear my voice. So if you do have any questions, please submit them at the end, but we're going to work through this topic today. So what is progressive overload? So progressive overload is a principle in strength training. The idea is that it involves gradually increasing the weight, reps, or sets of an exercise to continually challenge the muscles and promote growth. So the goal is to challenge the body in a way that it adapts and becomes stronger over time. So when we're thinking about progressive overload and what that means, obviously it's a principle in strength training. It's not only relevant in strength training, it's relevant across anything where we are creating a stimulus or we're eliciting a stimulus. Well, we are administering a stimulus in order to elicit some changes. So again, let's say, for example, you are new to running. You are going to be challenging your muscles, and you will actually get a small portion of like muscle growth as well, or muscle adaptation, because running, let's say you're a beginner, it's not something you've been doing, you start to challenge yourself, you're going to be challenging those muscle tissues. So again, it's anywhere that we are applying load, or, yes, we're applying load to the muscles, guys. We're trying to, push that bar slightly further along. We're trying to, create some changes, and change cannot happen without being made to change. So that's basically what's going on with the muscles and the growth, and why we want to do progressive overload, right? So how could we apply this in real-time situations? How could we apply this to our home and our gym workouts? I've kind of explained how that can occur with running, let's say. The way that we can do that is all within the application. So we can gradually increase the weights used within the resistance training sessions. We can actually add more resistance. So again, in the way of using things like bands or even body weight. So bands, time. So again, thinking about the length of time that we might do a certain exercise for. So let's say you're, again, holding a plank for 20 seconds. You will be creating some progressive overload just by increasing that to 30 seconds, let's say. And let's say each week you start to increase that by 5 seconds. There is your progressive overload. You've got a reason for the muscle to change based and adapt based on the application, or the muscles need to adapt. And again, as we've said or mentioned already, intensity to cardio workouts. Again, let's say we could go back to running again. So let's say we've got someone who, they're not a beginner as such, but maybe they are, they're a seasoned runner. They do it often, but they don't enter races. They're not a professional runner by any means. But they do it frequently enough in order to increase or progress through that, again, they can do things like focusing on technique. They can focus on time, the intensity as well. So perhaps maybe they might even add some intervals in there. There'll be ways to manipulate the activity to create that progressive overload. Other things we can do, for example, with home workouts, we can increase the lever load on bodyweight exercises. So example, by increasing the range of motion or even the horizontal position in a press up. So for those of you that can see me, I'm not about to demonstrate a press up, but let's say this is the floor here, and you can add a small incline. This hand here is my body. I could put my hands on a wall and bring my feet slightly further away from the wall to make, let's say I'm an absolute beginner to the push-up or press-up position. I could start on the wall. Maybe I'd find that quite easy to begin with, or I'd feel challenged and I get better at it. I could then progress that by changing the lever, so lowering my body down. So maybe now adding in a small block, or maybe even the edge of a sofa, and do press ups there. Get really comfortable with that. And then let's say I want to make it even more challenging. I can get down to the floor. Well, how would you progress that from there? You could do the opposite. You could actually put your feet up on something and add almost like a descending lever load there. You can create more tension on the muscles in so many different ways, which brings me on to the next point. So it's actually changing the tension as well. But with this one, we're talking about changing the tension on reps by using tempo and pulses. So let's take that press up position again. And let's say with the press up position, you're in your horizontal position and you want to add in some tempos. So you might come down slowly down towards the floor. You may add in a hold. You may pulse in certain ranges of that press up. God, that would absolutely kill. And then you might explode out of it, for example. So we're actually using different ways of creating progressive overload. And I haven't mentioned it within the slides here, but we could even apply changes to the muscles eccentrically. So again, as we've used here with the press up example, slowing that push up down will be challenging the muscles in an eccentric, the eccentric phase of the muscle. So the lengthening phase of the muscle when it's still sort of very tensioned. And yeah, that is actually, there are some great benefits with doing that. So everything is not just about lifting the weight as fast as possible and always thinking about concentric. So that's obviously where the muscles shortened. Quite often when we get into strength training or as beginners, we might assume that is the only way to get strong. There are a great way of using things like tempo, slowing down, increasing that eccentric activity to try and create some more tensioning on the muscle. Utilizing rest periods. So I actually say utilizing because I feel like I know, look, at the end of the day, I don't always do this myself, but I really do try and practice it. And very rarely do I see people doing this in the gym as well. They don't actually use their rest times. Now, you'll find within my app, within the programs that I've set you ladies, that so if you are on my program, that you have specific rest periods. So if we wanted to try and increase the intensity, we might actually decrease the rest period. Now, that's not always a good idea. It honestly depends on what we're trying to get out of the set itself, or the number of repetitions that are in there, and the sort of the number of reps really, and the amount of the level of intensity that we're trying to create. So again, if we are really trying to maximize pure power and strength, we might not use shorter rest periods. We'll actually find that with rest periods, by having longer rest periods, we recover better. And then we're able to lift more during that during the next working set, for example. So again, we could apply this to our press ups as well. Or how about we just take it to squats? Let's say you're doing, you've got quite heavy loaded squats. You're working more in the strength phase. So you're looking at sort of, between 5 and 7 reps, for example. And you might find that within our programming, if we're looking at strength, then we're not looking at trying to create hypertrophy or muscle changes, so like muscle growth per se. We might be looking at longer rest periods to try and move the weight, or move heavier weight, especially if we are trying to get stronger. There will be periods that this is really beneficial to do, to really kind of test our strength. We can apply this in different phases of our training as well. But ultimately, yeah, there's so much manipulation that we can do just by working with time and rest periods as well. So obviously, I think I may have mentioned this somewhere, but actually, no, I haven't. Increase the number of repetitions or even sets. So let's say you're just going for your, 3 sets of 10. It's kind of going easy. You don't feel as though you can actually lift heavier. You're using a machine. You can't select the pin to go heavier in weight. That might not work for you, but what might work for you is actually adding in an extra set, which will then take me to my next point of increasing the overall volume during the exercise sets performed. We'll be talking a little bit more about volume shortly or later on in the slides, but I thought that would be, one worth mentioning. So the importance of tracking. So we've kind of talked about we've talked about different variables that we can apply to our training programs as well. And that's not to say that every week you're going to chop and change, but what's really important is to actually track your progress. So this is going to be essential for achieving your results. So the tools that you might need for this, you can go old school here. We did this before we had fancy smartphones and technology. I've got many a number of old scrapbooks with, columns drawn, exercises, reps, weights that I've lifted within the session. You could say that I've been really keen on looking at that progress and trying to get stronger over time for, many years. But these days we've got technology, and if you're on my program, you've got the amazing Girl Boss Method app. So within this, when you're given your program, you can use that app within the actual exercise day or the workout. You can record your sets, your reps, your weights, the weight that you've used for the exercises. You can also utilize things like timers and also tempos. So tempo, I would probably put down as definitely more of an advanced skill. You really need to be quite seasoned to kind of understand how to lift first and, how to actually understand and utilize tempo as well. So again, we can do some more trainings on how to work tempo within sets or within repetitions. So it's such a great thing to use. But yeah, the idea is that, well, the benefit really is that I can see your progress over time. Well, the both of us can, and then I can adjust the workouts accordingly. So let's say, for example, you are plateauing or you need to change the exercises to increase the stimulus. And when I say change, we might be changing, the range of motion that we're taking that muscle through, even the angle as well. So not everything always, needs to be in one plane of movement. We might be adding in some more rotational positions as well. Yeah. So again, another wonderful thing that I can see is that when we start to work together over a longer period of time, And when you actually truly stick to a program for a longer period of time, we can see how much progress you are making within just that one exercise. If we take, for example, like a hip thrust, we'll take a hip thrust, and we can see how you've been progressing, where you started 12 weeks ago and where you are on, like, where you are 12 weeks later. Have you actually lifted heavier weights? Has your rep ranges changed? And it's not always, the answer isn't always hidden in rep sets and weights. I did mention this wonderful word volume previously. And that's another thing that we really need to consider, because that will obviously be a sum of the total amount of workload that you have given, that exercise within the workout. Right. So other things to consider when it comes to progressive overload. And again, when we're thinking about any form of loading or training or progressing, or, trying to lift heavier and work out better, and we need to get realistic. So we need proper nutrition. So you do need to consider things, like your calories and your macros, your recovery as well. So, sleep, sufficient sleep is very important. So we do have other trainings on sleep as well, so for you guys to look into as well. And also rest. So everything we do when we're trying to look at muscle growth or changes within the body, whatever it is that we're trying to see in terms of that progress, it's not just going to be by stacking session upon session upon session. You do need to rest and recover. A lot of the magic happens within sleep. Yeah. So, and I did say be realistic with how you apply it. So I'm going to give you an example here. So for those of you that can see, you can literally just read the lines as I read along, or read along as I read out. So for example, let's say we've got an 8-week program. You've just been given the program. Between weeks 1 and 2, you might spend getting used to the program and actually the new exercises, especially if it's a change up in your routine. In some way, there's going to be some adaptations that are happening just because you have changed things. That does not mean that we need to change exercises week on week. No way. This is just purely for someone, let's say you've been doing the same thing for like 30 weeks. And yeah, we change things up. We have the same muscles working, but we just use different, rep ranges or exercises. We tweak them slightly. Perhaps maybe we'll use an incline press instead of a flat press, very small little tweaks there. Week 3 to 4, you might look at increasing the reps to the higher end of the set. So for example, in some of your program, you might notice that the rep range says between 15 and 20, and it's not just for you to kind of pick a random number in between those. It's to basically say that within that, it also allows you a point to know when to go up with the weights. So let's say you've got 15 to 20 reps. You've picked a weight that you can lift 15 repetitions for. Now, on that 3rd or 4th week, you might find that the weight's getting easier. So again, to create some more progressiveness within that, you will try and hit towards 20. And then when you get to 20, you might find, that's the time when you can sort of increase the weights, because actually, we don't want to be comfortable here. We don't want to be ridiculous. And I've kind of put these weeks, 2 weeks at a time, just as a kind of midpoint, really. We don't want to be changing things absolutely every week. You need your body time. There's so many things that are going to come into play. Again, I've talked about rest and sleep, but I've not talked about within this lecture the different phases of your menstrual cycle and how that might affect your ability to apply this progressive overload technique or format. So weeks 5 to 6, you've increased the weights. And then let's say 7 to 8, where you've increased the weights, you may have compromised on your form, for example. So week 7 and 8, you can start, or kind of add in that and take the focus within the session to the form, the technique, and the breathing. And also within that, you can apply tempo, or consider tempo, as I love to say. Right. So up on my screen, and this is kind of, where you guys that are just listening in are missing out on this, but I'll talk you through nonetheless. So up on the slide, I've got 3 different exercises. We've got a leg press. We've got a leg press where and all of these exercises, mind you, have they've got a number of different number of sets. Okay. Right. So firstly, which one of these exercises shows the greatest amount of progressive overload? That is the question. Then there is a table, and we've got leg press where someone has done 3 sets of 100 kilos for 8 reps at a time. Then you have someone that's done, the same person. You've done the second exercise is a calf glute bridge. There's no particular reason why I picked these out other than the answer that I'm going to tell you in a minute. You've got 4 sets here, 25 kilos each within those sets. And we've got varying repetitions of 20, 15, 12, and 10. And then we're looking at hip abduction machine where we've got 52 kilos, 3 lots of sets, and they've done the same amount. They've actually done the same amount of weight for each of these exercises. Right. So I'm asking which one. And I've actually put in, believe it or not, I've put in the calf glute bridge. Which is interesting because I'm shocked by that as well, because when I actually study those 3 exercises, the calf glute bridge, they have used the same weight within each rep range, which is actually, on my part, my bad. I don't think I actually looked at that last column, but let's just say, for example, it was exactly the same number of reps. But I think the point that I'm trying to make here is you guys can't see this, but there are stars on these exercises. That's what you can't see. There are 3 stars on the calf glute bridge, 2 on the hip abduction machine, and 0 on the leg press machine. And I think the point that I was trying to make here is, although the leg press shows 100 kilos, that does not show the ultimate amount of greatest amount of progressive overload. It's actually the calf glute bridge. And the reason being that for this specific person, they were able to improve their 1 rep max. Okay, so the ability, the amount of load that they can do in 1 repetition. So it kind of calculates that for you very cleverly. They'd actually hit a PB within the actual weight that they've used. And because there were 4 sets, the amount of volume also increased. So this is basically progress based on a week by week example. And actually, when I look back at the calf glute bridge and I see that, the first working set, they've done 20 reps. The second working set, they've done 15. The third working set, they've done 12. And the final set, they've done 10. They have only used 25 kilos within for each of those sets, even though there is a descending rep range, a rep range which starts high and then slowly lowers. Now, the first assumption might be, well, actually, they're not even progressing within the rep range, and I'll come on to that in a moment. But the third thing, something again that we don't really know what's going on here, is we don't know how they have been applying themselves within those sets. They may have changed the actual tempo to make those descending rep ranges, harder as they've gone through, the workout itself. So we'll come on to the next point here. Right. So we're going to go back to the CAS glute bridge, and I've actually just recorded a little summary here. So what we do know is that the 3 stars indicate a record. We talked about this. Therefore, this exercise has increased weights, overall volume due to either more reps or sets, because they did have 4 sets. We did highlight that. And they have increased their 1 RM by lifting more total weight. So well done. This is where I'm going to come on to the progression or the importance of actually selecting. Let's forget tempo. Let's forget the intensity that we're applying. Let's just talk purely about the variables of the reps, the weight, and the actual number of sets. So we're going to say that this exercise here is taken from the leg press, for example. When I'm looking at the screen, there are 3 figures here, and they're actually representative of 3 different weeks. And this is an example of how progressive overload has been applied. So week 1, they did 100 kilos for every set, and they only did 8 reps for every set. Week 2, they still only did 100 kilos, but the progression here was they increased 2 of the sets by 2 reps each. They actually went up for the first and second set to 10 reps, and the final set, they only managed to get 8 reps. The third and final week, they were still using 100 kilos, but they managed to bring each of those working sets up to 10 repetitions. Now, for someone that might be looking at that, you might go, oh gosh, they're not really making that much progress. But when you look at the top right-hand corner, you'll see this wonderful word, volume. Volume is the total amount of weight that somebody has lifted within that working exercise. Week 1, when we total that all up, it amounts to 2,400 kilos. Week 2, the volume is 2,800 kilos. And week 3, it goes up to a full 3,000 kilos just by manipulating rep ranges. And finally, I've got an example of not actually considering the actual rep to load stroke weight ratio within the different sets. This is what I was talking about earlier on, guys. So I was explaining that within that CAS glute bridge exercise, this person had a descending rep range, and they hadn't changed the weights. So I'm actually going to show you it here with, I've got barbell hip thrust example on the screen. And here they've got 5 sets. So we're just purely talking about how to increase how important it is to increase the load within the actual exercise, working all the sets across that activity. This person selected 30 kilos. And the reason why I brought this to attention is because they've done this week on week. No matter how much I tell them, they need to increase the weight. And I'm going to give that explanation now. You can see the 1 RM on the right-hand side on the column, right? This person's 1 RM is sitting around 50 kilos, and it drops as they go through each of the sets. So the first 2 sets, they're doing 20 repetitions at 30 kilos. And then they're doing set 3, 4, and 5. They've got 10 reps, and they're still sitting at 30 kilos. There is no progress within that. And I know this factually, that this person specifically needs to increase the amount of load they are adding to that barbell. So the first 2 sets are almost like a warm-up, or getting the muscle switched on, getting it focused, getting it, going through the movement pattern, going through the technique, going through, the motions of feeling, the effects of that hip thrust. going through, working through the lengthened position up to the shortened. And then when you're coming up to the next 3 sets, they're more like working sets. So this is where I need you to feel as though you are, you're not just going through the motions here, but you are lifting heavier than 30 kilos. Let's say you add an extra 5 on either side for that 3rd set. You're going to do those 10 reps. You're going to do 40 kilos and you've progressed. Then on the 4th set, you might add on 2.5s on either side. So that's gone from 30 to 40 to now you've got 45 kilos and you've worked that through 10 repetitions. You're going to add some more progress here. And let's say for that final 10, it might be, and this is okay, it might be that you can't actually progress beyond that 45 kilos and you actually decide to take off a little bit more. And let's say you actually go lower, you decide that you can't actually lift that much, and maybe the next week is the week that you're going to add on more weight. But anyway, that's an example of how we can apply that progressive overload in real time, and also just almost like another little telling off, really, that ladies, increase your weights. I've got a habit of clicking back on the slides. So as we move forward, okay. So just a final summary from me. Your sessions need to be challenging. There will be times when things like sickness, your menstrual cycle, again, very unique and dependent on to all of you as individuals, your lack of sleep, lower calories can have an effect on your strength ability and your general fatigue, or even time constraints as well. They will all have an effect on your ability to apply progressive overload. So we really need to kind of factor in the whole lifestyle and the full picture here. Just as weight loss or weight gain is not linear, neither will the progress in your sessions week on week. So this is a reminder, although I've given you an example of how we are applying progressive overload, we are not going to see that smooth sailing line, that graph just going up. It's not going to happen. That's not realistic. Very few people will be able to do it like that. Again, people that aren't impacted by these lifestyle stresses that I've mentioned. And above all, don't be afraid of getting bulky. It takes a very long time to achieve that look, and very few women can attain it naturally. So thank you so much for listening in, if you've got this far. If you've got any questions, ladies inside the program, join us live on Friday at 6:30 p.m. So this will be our live Q&A. We will ask questions. I'll give you the answers based on this topic or any other previous topics. It's our ability to check in with one another, also have a quick catch up and prepare for the weekend ahead. And for those of you that have been listening to the podcast, you can send me a DM on Instagram, although I've not allowed you to watch everything here. But if you've got any questions and there's anything specifically you would like me to cover or answer, then send me a message on Instagram. My handle, I'll spell it out for you. It's @RichuBra. That's my name. So that's spelled RichuBrar. And we will catch you here next time. Thank you so much for listening to me and the Girl Boss Method.